Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at a topic that I think a lot of people kind of shy away from a little bit.
Yeah.
Death and dying.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. And we're doing it through the lens of Ram Dass. You've given me this collection of his talks and personal stories, which is quite a lot to unpack.
It is.
So I think our mission here is to really try to distill like the core of what he had to say about death and dying.
Yeah, and I think rather than shying away from the heavier aspects,
Mhm.
you know, we can kind of approach this with the same kind of like curiosity and sometimes even humor
Yeah.
that Ram Dass was known for.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because he really did embrace the whole spectrum of it. And I think one thing I'm curious about is like what led him to such a unique perspective.
Yeah, I mean, his background is really key.
Yeah.
He began as Richard Alpert, Harvard professor and scientist.
Yeah.
Very much rooted in the world of logic and data.
Mm.
But then this profound spiritual awakening led him to become Ram Dass and completely transformed his worldview.
That's quite a shift.
Yeah.
How did that change how he viewed death?
Well, it led him to contrast Western culture's fear and avoidance of death with the more open, integrated approach that he witnessed in India. He talks about seeing bodies being carried through the streets as part of funeral rituals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is a stark contrast to our tendency to sanitize and hide death away.
Yeah.
He even critiques modern medicine, particularly intensive care units, for sometimes treating death as a failure rather than a natural part of life.
It does seem like we go to great lengths to deny that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you think that makes us more anxious about it?
Ram Dass argued that by acknowledging death, accepting it as a natural part of life's cycle, we can actually live more fully and authentically.
Right.
It's not about becoming morbid,
Right.
but rather developing this conscious awareness of death's presence, which paradoxically can make life feel more vibrant and precious.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from him.
Yeah.
He said, "Death does not have to be treated as an enemy for you to delight in life."
Yeah.
I love that because it's like, stop fearing the inevitable and start appreciating this gift. Yeah.
Of being alive.
Yeah, and for Ram Dass, this wasn't just an intellectual idea,
Right.
His experiences with psychedelics, particularly mushrooms in Mexico, played a huge part in shifting his understanding of life, death, and consciousness.
Wow.
He describes reaching this state of awareness that felt permanent, extending beyond the limitations of his physical body.
To have an experience like that must have been so life-changing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. He began identifying less with his physical form and more with this enduring awareness. He even linked his psychedelic experiences to descriptions in the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Wow.
So you have this really fascinating example of ancient wisdom
Yeah.
intersecting with modern exploration.
So it wasn't just a change in thinking.
Yeah.
It was a change in his very being.
Yeah.
A shift from fearing death to embracing it.
Exactly. He began to view death as part of a larger process. He even talked about this concept of psychological death and rebirth.
Okay.
Yeah.
These profound shifts in our understanding and ways of being that we can experience throughout life.
Can you give an example of what he meant by psychological death and rebirth?
Imagine those moments when you shed old beliefs or identities that no longer serve you.
Right.
It's like a personal transformation, a shedding of an old skin to reveal a truer version of yourself.
Yeah.
Ram Dass suggested that we experience these deaths and rebirths multiple times in our lives, each time getting closer to our true selves.
It makes me think about how maybe those smaller deaths can actually prepare us for the ultimate letting go, the physical death, by getting comfortable with change and transformation in our everyday lives. Maybe we can face death with less fear.
He wasn't advocating detachment from life or becoming emotionless, though.
Okay.
He actually emphasized the importance of fully experiencing the full range of human emotion, including grief. He even had a powerful message encouraging us to embrace grief, fully allowing the pain to flow without trying to suppress it.
That goes against the grain of our cultural conditioning, doesn't it?
It does.
Like we're told to be strong in the face of loss.
Yeah, he directly challenged that notion, suggesting that trying to suppress or deny grief only prolongs suffering.
Yeah.
He felt that grief was a natural and necessary part of the healing process.
Yeah. This reminds me of that powerful story about his letter to the parents of the two murdered girls.
Oh, right.
He didn't know the family personally,
Yeah.
but he felt compelled to reach out.
Yeah.
What struck me was he didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix their pain,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, he simply acknowledged the rawness of their grief. He wrote, "Dear so-and-so, I know that your hearts are broken. I know that you are feeling an unbearable pain, and I know that there are no words that can truly comfort you at this time.
Wow.
So, he didn't shy away from the heavy stuff,
Yeah.
the real pain of loss.
Yeah.
But he also saw the potential for growth and transformation within that suffering.
I'm struck by his approach. Just sitting with their pain.
Yeah.
Offering love and support from afar.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to fix anything or offer solutions, he just offered his presence.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a profound lesson in empathy and presence. It's about meeting people where they are without judgment or the need to fix things.
It's like saying, yes, grief is incredibly difficult, but it's also an opportunity to connect with our shared humanity.
Right.
To deepen our capacity for compassion.
Absolutely.
Do you think that was part of his message?
Yeah, and that's where his perspective on the enduring nature of love comes in.
Okay.
He believed that love transcended physical death. Those connections we share with others create a unity that goes beyond form.
Yeah.
So even though physical death might separate us,
right.
the essence of that love, the energy of those bonds persists.
It's comforting to think that the essence of our loved ones remains connected to us in some way even after they're gone.
Yeah. Ram Dass believed that we could sense the presence of loved ones who had passed away, feeling their energy even though their physical bodies were gone.
Yeah.
He encouraged us to connect with the essence of our loved ones, not just the form.
Right.
Through shared memories, activities they loved,
right.
or simply talking to them in our hearts.
This idea of connecting with essence reminds me of the story he told about his friend Kelly, the quadriplegic man who wanted to end his life.
Right. That story really highlights the symbolic power of dying that Ram Dass spoke about.
Okay.
Kelly's desire to die became a symbol that overshadowed his true essence.
Yeah.
Ram Dass had to work to move beyond that symbol,
right.
beyond the limitations of Kelly's physical body, and truly see the person within.
Okay. And then the story takes a dramatic turn, right?
It does.
Kelly decides to end his life through fasting.
Yeah, and this obviously raises ethical questions, which Ram Dass acknowledged. He struggled with Kelly's decision, recognizing his right to choose, but also expressing sadness and the belief that Kelly had more to do in this life.
Right. It's complex.
It is.
How can we apply this idea of the symbolic power of dying to our own lives? How can we move beyond labels and diagnoses to connect with the true essence of others?
It's a practice of awareness, really. Yeah. Just as Ram Dass had to work to see Kelly beyond the symbol of his condition.
Right.
We can all work to see past the superficial and connect with the essence of those around us.
It's a challenge to see beyond those initial impressions.
It is.
And truly connect with someone's inner being.
It is. But it's a powerful practice that can transform our relationships. Just like with Kelly, whose decision to forced everyone around him to confront their own fears and detachments. And ultimately, after 49 days, he decided to eat.
That must have been a huge turning point for everyone involved.
Oh, it was. Yeah. Ram Dass suggested that by confronting death so directly, Kelly gained a renewed appreciation for life. And the experience deeply affected those around him, forcing them to confront their own mortality and the preciousness of life.
It's almost like Kelly, by facing his own death, taught those around him a profound lesson about living.
He did. And it brings us to a key takeaway from Ram Dass.
Yeah.
He encouraged us to approach death not with fear and dread, but with curiosity, acceptance, and maybe even a touch of humor.
Yeah.
He didn't want us to become morbid or obsessed with death,
right,
but rather to integrate it into our understanding of life,
right,
to acknowledge its presence without letting it dominate our thoughts and actions.
It reminds me of the story he told about the Zen master's final humorous verse.
Oh, yeah.
Birth is us, death is us, verse or no verse, what's the fuss?
Yeah, it's a beautiful reminder that even in the face of death,
right,
there's room for humor and perspective.
Yeah.
It's a way of acknowledging the grand mystery of life and death without taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah. That lightheartedness in the face of something so serious is quite remarkable.
Ram Dass had a way of finding that balance between embracing the joy of life and accepting that it will eventually end.
Right.
Seeing both the light and the shadow as essential parts of the journey.
Yeah.
And one way he helps us understand that is through his fourth grade analogy.
Okay, I've heard him mention that.
Yeah.
But haven't really explored it. Can you explain a bit more about that?
He compares life to being in fourth grade.
Okay.
Imagine viewing all of life's difficulties as part of a curriculum, a set of lessons designed to help us grow and learn.
Okay.
Instead of resisting challenges or wishing things were different.
You're right.
What if we embrace them as opportunities for growth?
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
We could ask, what can I learn from this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a shift from a mindset of resistance to one of curiosity. And this perspective can be incredibly empowering because it suggests that even the tough stuff, the painful experiences, are ultimately serving a purpose in our development.
It's a very different way of framing our experiences and could lead to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of Ram Dass's wisdom on death and dying.
Yeah, we've only just dipped our toes into the deep end of his wisdom. You know, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore his experiences with dying patients, his vision for dying centers, and encounters with those who seem to have transcended death itself.
It sounds like we're about to go even deeper.
We are.
Okay. Welcome back to our deep dive into Ram Dass's teachings on death and dying. You know, we've been exploring how his unique perspective challenged Western culture's fear-based approach to death, encouraging us to embrace it as a natural part of life's journey. I'm curious to hear more about his work with dying patients. Did he observe any patterns in how people approach their final moments?
He did. You know, Ram Dass noticed a correlation between how people lived their lives and how they approached death. Those who had lived with fear and resistance often died clinging to life, fighting the inevitable.
It makes sense that our ingrained patterns of behavior would carry over into our final moments.
Yeah, and conversely, he found that those who had lived with more acceptance, love, and surrender tended to die more peacefully, embracing the transition with grace and openness.
So it wasn't so much about their beliefs about the afterlife, but their overall approach to life itself.
Precisely. It was about the qualities they had cultivated throughout their lives. Had they embraced acceptance and peace, or were they consumed by fear and resistance? These patterns seem to manifest in their final moments.
That's a powerful insight. It suggests that if we want to die peacefully, we need to start living peacefully now.
That's a key takeaway from Ram Dass's teachings. And it leads us to another fascinating concept he explored. The idea of dying centers.
I remember him mentioning those.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about what he envisioned?
He saw dying centers as spaces specifically designed for spiritual growth and awakening for those facing death in their loved ones. He imagined them as radically different from hospitals or traditional hospice care, places where death wouldn't be viewed as a failure, but as a natural and even sacred process.
So it would be more than just medical care.
Much more. He saw it as an opportunity for profound growth and transformation, not just for the dying person, but for everyone involved. He envisioned these centers as being more like monasteries or ashrams.
Oh, wow.
Places dedicated to spiritual development, but with a focus on preparing for the ultimate transition.
It's a beautiful idea to create spaces where people could come to terms with their own mortality, explore their spiritual beliefs, and connect with others facing similar journeys. But isn't that a pretty radical departure from how we currently approach death in our culture?
It is. Ram Dass knew that creating these centers would require a fundamental shift in how we view death, both individually and as a society. We're so conditioned to fear death, to avoid talking about it. He felt we needed to reclaim the spiritual significance of death, something that's been lost in our modern medicalized approach.
I wonder how our obsession with youth and vitality plays into that. We spend so much time and energy trying to deny the natural process of aging.
Ram Dass would argue that this avoidance only amplifies our fear. By pushing death away, we give it more power over us. Instead of fearing death, he encouraged us to become more conscious of its presence in our lives, to acknowledge it as a reality for all of us.
So to live each day as if it were our last.
Yes, but he might also add, live each day as if it were your first.
I like that.
You know, he emphasized approaching life with a sense of wonder and curiosity, like a child experiencing the world anew. It's about letting go of our preconceived notions and attachments, and opening ourselves to the mystery and wonder of life, even in the face of our own mortality.
It's a beautiful image, to face life and death with that same sense of childlike wonder. It reminds me of the story he told about the young man who came to him to learn yoga. And ended up having this incredibly intense experience involving a blue light. It almost sounded like he was fast-tracked on his spiritual path.
Ram Dass described it as an accelerated spiritual journey. The young man progressed rapidly in his yoga practice and eventually decided to dedicate himself fully to it by spending an entire winter alone in a cave, like a hermit, seeking enlightenment.
It's a powerful image. A young man seeking spiritual truth in the solitude of a cave. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
No. Tragically, the young man was found dead in the cave.
Oh, wow.
The circumstances surrounding his death were shrouded in mystery. Was it the harsh conditions?
Right.
Something about the intensity of his yoga practice? No one knew for sure. And to add to the mystery, his mother found his diary, and inside was this cryptic message. Mother, I have finished my work. I am with Christ and with Maharaji. Tell Ram Dass it's all right. Go with God, love.
That's quite a message to leave behind. It does sound like he's saying he achieved some kind of spiritual liberation.
Right.
But it's hard to know for sure. How did Ram Dass react to his death?
He was devastated and whittled with guilt, wondering if his introduction of the young man to LSD had played a role in his death.
Oh, wow.
He carried a lot of unresolved questions and felt the need to seek guidance from a higher source.
So what did he do?
He was preparing to visit his guru Maharaji in India.
Okay.
And he felt compelled to take the young man's high school graduation photo with him. While sitting with Maharaji, he impulsively showed him the photo. Maharaji, with incredible insight, simply said, "He's dead."
It sounds like Maharaji had access to a level of knowing that's beyond our comprehension.
Ram Dass was on the verge of a revelation, but he was still clinging to his guilt about the LSD. Sensing his internal struggle, Maharaji said something that shattered his assumptions.
Okay.
He died from your medicine.
It's easy to see why Ram Dass immediately thought of the LSD.
Of course. He was convinced that Maharaji was confirming his worst fears.
Yeah.
But Maharaji was operating on a different level. Instead of dwelling on the LSD, he dove into the young man's diary, reciting it verbatim.
Wow.
And confirmed the mother's intuition.
Spiritual liberation.
Exactly. It challenges our assumptions about what a good death looks like.
Right.
Can someone so young who died seemingly before their time truly be enlightened?
Yeah.
Maharaji's answer was a resounding yes.
It's a profound message. It suggests that enlightenment isn't about living a long life, but about the quality of our awareness, the depth of our connection to something beyond the physical. Did Maharaji elaborate on this idea?
He did. To further emphasize this point, Maharaji added the statement that completely reframed the whole concept of death. Nobody dies a moment before their time, and nobody remains a moment after it.
That raises all sorts of questions about fate versus free will, the nature of time, and the possibility of accelerating our spiritual journeys.
It does. It suggests there may be a larger cosmic plan at play, a predetermined time for each of us to depart.
It makes you wonder if our anxieties about death stem from a limited understanding of its true nature.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
To further illustrate this point, Ram Dass shared a story about a Tibetan Lama who consciously planned his own death. He even sent out invitations for tea before his passing.
He planned his own death? How is that even possible?
It's a concept that's difficult to grasp from a Western perspective.
Yeah.
But in some spiritual traditions,
right.
Death is viewed as a natural transition that can be approached with awareness and acceptance. This Lama fully embraced that perspective.
It's like a farewell party.
Yeah.
A celebration of life and a conscious transition into the unknown.
Exactly. It's a completely different way of looking at death than what we're used to. And it raises all sorts of questions about the potential for conscious dying practices.
All of these stories, from the young man who died in the cave to the Tibetan Lama who planned his death, point to this deeper understanding of death that moves beyond fear and embraces the mystery of what lies beyond.
That's the power of Ram Dass's teachings. He didn't give us simple answers. He encouraged us to explore these big questions, to challenge our assumptions, and to be open to the mystery of it all.
But do we ever really get any definitive answers?
I think the main takeaway is that death, like life, is full of mystery. Even with spiritual practice and a deep understanding of these concepts, death remains a profound unknown.
So instead of trying to figure it all out, maybe the key is to cultivate a sense of curiosity and openness, a willingness to embrace the mystery without needing all the answers.
And that's where the story of Anita comes in. Ram Dass mentioned her death earlier.
Yeah.
He saved that story for last.
It's almost like he's inviting us to step into this realm of the unknown with him.
He said, now I just want to play with the edge of the mystery with you. The mystery of Anita's death. Even after all these stories and insights, death still remains this profound mystery.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's okay.
It keeps us humble, curious, and open to new possibilities. It's like those moments when you encounter something unexplainable.
Yeah.
Something that forces you to question everything you thought you knew.
That's the power of these teachings. They challenge us to think beyond our limited understanding, to embrace the mystery of life and death, and to find meaning and purpose, even in the face of the unknown.
My mind has been stretched in so many ways.
Yeah.
It's both humbling and inspiring.
That's the beauty of exploring these spiritual teachings.
Yeah.
They connect us to something larger than ourselves, something that goes beyond our individual lives and deaths.
We've covered so much ground already, but it feels like there's still more to uncover.
Right.
More stories to hear and more insights to glean. What will we explore in the final part of our deep dive?
We'll shift our focus to the practical applications of Ram Dass's teachings.
Oh.
We'll explore how we can live these principles in our daily lives, cultivate a more conscious approach to death, and find peace and acceptance in the face of the unknown.
Wow. We've been on quite a journey exploring Ram Dass's perspective on death and dying. From his personal experiences with psychedelics to these profound stories of those facing their final moments. It's been a lot to take in. But now I'm curious, how do we actually integrate these teachings into our lives,
Right.
It's one thing to talk about embracing death, but it's another thing entirely to actually do it. Where do we even begin?
It's a natural question. We've explored some pretty profound concepts.
Yeah.
But Ram Dass was all about bridging the gap between spiritual understanding and lived experience.
Yeah.
He wanted these teachings to become part of our lives,
Yeah.
not just intellectual exercises.
How do we make this wisdom practical?
Well, one of the most powerful practices he recommended is simply cultivating awareness. Throughout the day, just pause and ask yourself,
Okay.
am I aware?
Okay.
It's a way to bring your attention to the present moment.
Right.
To check in with yourself. Am I coming from a place of love or fear, reacting or responding, being mindful or mindless?
It sounds like a mini meditation we can do anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. Even a few moments of awareness can shift our perspective,
Right.
change the quality of our interaction,
Yeah.
and help us make more conscious choices.
Right.
It's about bringing that awareness to everything we do.
And this practice can be especially helpful when dealing with death and loss, both our own and that of others.
Right.
Ram Dass talked about the importance of grieving with people, allowing space for all the emotions that come up.
He emphasized meeting people in their suffering without judgment.
Okay.
We're trying to fix things. So often we try to avoid uncomfortable emotions,
Right.
either in ourselves and in others. But Ram Dass suggests that the most impassionate thing we can do is simply be present with their suffering.
So instead of offering platitudes or trying to distract people from their pain, just acknowledge it.
Yes. Validate their feelings. Offer a listening ear.
Okay.
Without trying to offer solutions or make things better.
Right.
We don't always have to have the answers or say the perfect thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes just being there is enough.
It's about offering our presence, our empathy, our willingness to sit with someone in their pain.
Right. And this applies to our own experiences of grief as well. Instead of pushing away our sadness, anger, or fear, we can allow ourselves to feel those emotions fully, without judgment.
It's about honoring our own process, giving ourselves permission to grieve in our own way, in our own time. I can see how cultivating awareness and compassion both towards ourselves and others can change how we view death itself.
It allows us to see death not as an ending, but as a transition, a natural part of life's cycle.
Like that rose analogy Ram Dass used.
Right.
We can try to preserve its beauty, hold on to it forever.
Yeah.
But eventually it wilts and decays.
It's the natural order of things. By accepting the impermanence of all things, including our own lives, we can find peace and even liberation.
He talked about finding the way.
Right.
So that we can gladly die in the evening. What did he mean by that?
I think it's about discovering our purpose, our connection to something larger than ourselves.
Right.
Aligning with a path that feels authentic and meaningful.
So that when death comes, we can face it with a sense of peace, knowing that we lived a life true to ourselves.
Yeah.
A life filled with love and purpose.
That's the ultimate goal. To live in such a way that when death comes, we can welcome it as a natural transition, a graduation into something unknown.
It's a beautiful aspiration. And it brings us back to Ram Dass's idea that death is like a mirror reflecting how we've lived our lives.
Right. If we've lived with fear and attachment, Those patterns will likely be present in our dying process.
Okay.
But if we've cultivated love, compassion, and acceptance,
Right.
those qualities will also shine through.
It's like we're creating a spiritual resume throughout our lives.
Right.
And death is the final review.
That's a powerful way to think about it.
Yeah.
And it suggests that if we want to die consciously and peacefully,
Yeah.
we need to start living consciously and peacefully now.
So much of what Ram Dass taught was about challenging our ingrained patterns, our habitual ways of thinking and behaving.
Absolutely.
He was encouraging us to step outside our comfort zones, to question our assumptions, and to embrace a more expansive view of life and death.
You know, he wanted us to recognize the perfection within the imperfection, the beauty that exists even in the midst of suffering a loss.
Right.
It's not about denying the pain or pretending everything's okay.
Right.
It's about learning to see through a different lens, one that acknowledges the wholeness that exists even in brokenness.
As we cultivate this perspective, we can begin to approach death with less fear and more acceptance, realizing it's not the end, but a transition into something beyond our current comprehension.
And in the face of that vast unknown, Ram Dass offered a simple yet profound piece of advice.
Okay.
Be here now.
Embrace this moment fully and completely. Let go of fears and attachments and open yourself to the mystery and wonder of life, knowing that death, like life, is a journey into the unknown. This deep dive into Ram Dass's teachings has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I've gained a new perspective on death and dying, one that is both humbling and empowering.
Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah.
We hope that Ram Dass's wisdom has inspired you to look at life and death with more awareness, compassion, and grace.
May we all live and die with open hearts and curious minds.